You're listening to the Piano Parent Podcast with Shelley Davis, episode 351. Hey there, and welcome to the Piano Parent Podcast. I'm Shelley Davis, a longtime piano teacher and parent with my husband of 4 mostly musical kids. As parents, we spend so much time trying to encourage and motivate our kids. We wonder if we're doing the best things for them. We second guess our decisions, and we worry if we're going to scar them for life. While you focus on encouraging your kids, I'm here to reassure and inspire you. I'll be here every week with practice tips, inspirational teacher interviews, and musical topics to help you impress your kids with your musical knowledge. Parenting is not for the faint of heart, but it's much easier with support, and you have come to the right place. Good morning, Vicky Weber. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me. I'm kind of fangirling a little bit right now. I have seen your books on Amazon, and I've been following you on Instagram for a while, and I'm delighted that you have taken some time to visit with me and my piano parent listeners on our podcast today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, just kind of your personal bio for anyone else who is just now meeting you for the first time?
Yeah, so the Cliff Notes is that I have a degree in music education from Millikan University. I taught elementary music for about 6 years, and prior to that, I actually taught private lessons, mostly piano, since high school. So I had a lot of students for quite a while. I left the classroom. I just never returned from my maternity leave with my daughters. So now I have a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old at home, and they are already starting to be piano obsessed. So we're entering that world ourselves from the parent perspective. But yeah, I'm a children's book author, and most of my books are based on my background in music education and helping encourage kids to, find the fun in reading and in music and meld those two worlds.
I love that. And that's one of the main reasons why I wanted you on, is I think it's so powerful for piano parents to be reading to their children. And if they're reading books that also pertain to music, that's just, in my view, that's the best of both worlds. So I love what you do, and I'm excited to hear more about it today. And I'm also glad to hear, I knew that you were an elementary educator, but I didn't know what other, specific instruments, if it was mostly voice or something else. But I do see the piano behind you, the keyboard. And so would you share with us a little bit more of your personal musical journey, when you started lessons, why you started lessons, and how your parents were influential in your success?
So my parents, they both love music. So I'm half Puerto Rican. My dad is Puerto Rican. My mother is Irish. She likes to joke that I am sorta Rican. Music has always just been like a huge part of my family and my culture, and all of those things. But neither of my parents are musicians. And so when I expressed an interest in music from a young age, I was the Disney princess running around the house, singing and belting everything, playing the drums on the Tupperware and the pots and pans. Like, that was me all day, every day. They started looking into things that they could do with me. And, most of what they did was just themselves. We would make up songs together. When it came to doing my homework, my mom always made up a song to go along with something. So I still remember the song she made up for our house phone number at the time, because it was important that I remember it. And so she knew if she made up a song that I would remember it. So there were lots of little things like that. But my dad always used to joke, because once I got into upper elementary school, I started taking piano lessons on and off for a little bit. My brother did too. And then in junior high, I started flute. So I was in band and choir from junior high all the way through high school. And then I went on to get my, music degree in college. So I was always heavily involved. I was like the marching band president and, I did all the things musically. And so whenever somebody would ask my dad, like, oh, where does she get it from? Because my brother was very musical too. So where does she get it from? He goes, oh, they get it from me. I'm really good at playing the radio. That was his running dad joke about it. But yeah, neither of my parents were musicians, but they loved music, and most importantly, they knew that we loved it too. And so that was always their goal is, well, how can we support this? And they were never afraid to, sing songs with us and make music with us and dance with us, even though, half the time they were like, I'm no good at this, but they had a blast. And I feel like that was so important to instill in us at a young age is, sometimes you don't even have to be good at something to really love it. And sometimes getting good, takes being bad initially.
Yes. I love too that, I mean, in your eyes, your parents are rock stars. I mean, they're your favorite people growing up. And probably still now, but I love that your parents weren't inhibited, that they just did whatever to entertain you, to engage with you. They didn't feel like they had to be professionals or have their music degree. They're just making music with their children. And that's what it's all about. And I hope that's empowering to parents that are listening now. Just sing, be silly. It does sing bad. The badder you sing, the more fun it is. And
well, and I'll say too, my 2-year-old, and I'm a trained vocalist, my concentration in college is actually with a vocal emphasis. But I've played the flute, I play the piano, although I would not say I am a professional level pianist by any means. I am a adequate piano teacher is what I like to call myself. But I sing badly. Like I sing really badly for my daughter all the time because she just loves how much fun I'm having when I do that. So sometimes I'll be like, what? You don't like my singing? And she just giggles. And then she'll start singing too. But it's really taught her that like, it doesn't matter if you're off key. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's, it's about the experience. And so, we'll run around singing Let It Go real bad. And it's amazing.
The top of your lungs, the louder, the better. I'm glad to hear that you started in piano kind of off and on, and then that your school music program was very influential for you. I'm a band girl too, and I played trumpet, so we would have had fun marching and all of that sort of thing together. Did you continue piano lessons once you added band and choir to school? Or I know a lot of students when they hit those middle school years and all the extracurricular activities, something has to give. So how did that look for you?
Yeah, we started I had piano lessons on and off in elementary school. It mostly just came down to like sometimes it was money related and sometimes it was just life got so crazy, and all of the things in between. But we did always kind of cycle back to it. But then when junior high hit, my mom was very open with me. She basically said, I wanted to play flute and I wanted to learn how. I wanted to be in band. And my music program at school was prepared to teach me that. But when it came to private lessons, my mom said, we can't afford for you to do both. You need to pick one. What would you like to do? And so I chose flute. That's what I did for a while. But I never completely gave up on piano. I had those resources from before. I had my books, I had my routine, I had, just the habits that were instilled in me. And even though I was taking flute lessons, if she was having me, okay, spend X amount of time on scales, I would then turn around and try to do the same thing with piano. Even though I wasn't formally taking it with a teacher at the time, I still had my books. I still had songs I wanted to play, and I was still motivated to want to learn different songs and things like that. So, I do wish that, I could have continued, but I feel like in some ways I'm glad because I found the self-motivation to continue teaching myself. And I think that was a really good skill to have.
I agree. And that's something that I try to encourage parents with when they're making that decision. There's only so much money for extracurricular activities. There's only so much time to be involved in all these things. And I feel like if they've taken piano with me for a few years and they've learned that basic foundation, I tell students going from piano reading the grand staff with treble and bass and then transitioning to a single staff with whatever instrument you choose, that's going to be so much easier, and band is going to be so much fun because you already know so many of the concepts. And as far as parents are concerned, they're still being musical, and I still think that's very powerful. Selfishly, of course, you have to do piano with me till your dying day, but I know that's not realistic. So I'm glad to hear that encouragement from you, that your parents were still supportive and you were still musical, and all of those skills helped each other, and you continued. I really like the self-motivation idea.
Well, and I think too, so I did band in junior high, but I also did choir, and I had to do all the crazy things to be involved in both.
Mm.
Like at one point, the counselors and my parents were like, you might need to pick one, but I was like, I don't want to pick one. They're like, okay, then you have to do like 0 hour, or you have to come in like super early in the morning. I'm like, I don't care. I'm gonna do it. Um, so I did a lot with choir, and all the things I learned with piano made being a vocalist so much easier because I wasn't relying on hearing somebody else sing it, or, I wasn't completely reliant on sight reading, although I did get very good at that. I was able to learn my pieces faster and have a better relationship all around with music and gaining those skills. So, yeah.
Love that. That is so good. Um, and of course, I'm trying to figure out a good segue to get into where you are these days. I wonder, as a child, were you also or a teenager, were you also interested in writing? And did you make stories as a youngster, or was that something that came along later?
So I've always been a bookworm, like
Mm.
always, my whole life. I mean, I was a teacher's pet before I even went to school. I mean, like there was one day I put on my Elmo backpack and tried sneaking onto the school bus at like 3, 4 years old. And my mom was like, where are you going? I'm going to school. She's like, you don't go to school yet. And I'm like, yes, I do.
Please.
I've always loved learning. I've always loved reading. Um, I've always like read above grade level. I read so much to the point where there were times, rightfully so, that my mom had to ground me from reading because I was reading instead of doing my chores or doing what she asked, or whatever it might be. And then she would get mad at me because she's like, do you see how ridiculous you're making me look that I have to ground you for reading a book? Like other parents are judging me,
Yeah.
and you know it. You know you're doing this to me. And she was right. But I've always been a bookworm, and I've always loved writing. I've always been very good at English. And so when I was in high school, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. That was something I knew from a very young age. And so what I flip-flopped back and forth with was whether I wanted to be an English teacher or whether or not I wanted to teach music.
Mm.
And ultimately, I had an opportunity my senior year of high school that really solidified the music part for me. It was basically like almost like a mini student teaching experience where my choir director, um, he split the choir in half. It was our top choir, and he picked two students who were graduating soon and wanted to go into teaching, and they got to direct one song. And so like each person got half of the choir for this one song, and they got a dedicated amount of time over the semester to work on it with the choir and be the teacher. They had an accompanist. It was very cool.
Boy.
So I was one of the people picked for that, and it was an amazing experience, and I really loved it. And so that was what I'm like, this is what I want to do. And so that's what I ended up pursuing, but I never let go of my love of reading or my love of English. And when I went into the classroom as a teacher, what I quickly realized, I worked at a lot of low income schools.
Mm-hmm.
My students did not love reading hardly at all.
Yeah.
And I even had one student, I will never forget this moment. My first day at this school, he had to be like physically placed into my room because he fought so hard. He
Mm.
did not want to come to music class. He did not have a good experience with the prior music teacher. He did not want to be there. He'd already decided it was, not a safe space, not a place he wanted to be. And so the very first thing that I told myself is I'm looking at this demographic of students. I had half of them who were excited just because they love music, they love to sing. And then I had this other half that did not want to be there, that had, not ideal prior experiences. And almost none of them liked reading.
Mm.
And the other thing I realized very quickly was my strongest readers were often my strongest musicians,
Yes.
purely because the skills that you use to read overlap. Even something as simple as tracking, where your eyes track left to right, that's a skill
Yes.
that you have to obtain. That doesn't come naturally. You have to learn that. And so when you're reading music, you have to learn to look left to right. That's why kids sometimes will write up, down, or all over the place until they learn otherwise. So I started thinking, well, how, I got them to love music. That was my goal and I achieved it. But I'm like, but how do I get them to love reading? Because the more they love reading, the more they're going to do it. And the more they do it, they're not just going to be better in my class. They're going to be better students overall. They're going to be better lifelong learners. They're going to have a stronger foundation for the rest of their lives. And as a teacher, yes, I want them to do well in music, but I want them to do well in life.
Yes.
So I had to, I started thinking about it and I just started making up stories. They loved books like Don't Push the Button, or There's a Monster in Your Book, the ones where you turn the book upside down and shake it and push the button and yell at a pigeon. They loved all of that. And I thought to myself, well, why can't we have musical books like that? And there wasn't an answer. There wasn't a reason why. So I started making them. And that's where this whole journey began.
That and they say necessity is the mother of invention, and you are living proof. We recently had a Scholastic book fair. Nothing again. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say a name. I don't know, but one of my personal pet peeves. I would love to buy books. I would be their number one customer if they would sell music books, but I don't. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe they have those available, and our school just isn't on the rotation. I don't know, but if you have any ends with Scholastic Book Fair, Vicky, I encourage you to pursue that.
Well, and I do think the biggest way to show publishers that we need books like this is by supporting them, whether that means buying them, checking them out at a library, requesting them at your local bookstore, leaving reviews on Amazon, because that's how, honestly, that's how the representation in literature movement started, was because people started to say, no, we want these books. And that's an amazing change, but it's taken time to get there, and that's amazing. And we want it to continue going down that route, but publishers are a business and they don't like taking risks, which means they go with what they know or what they think they know will sell. So if we show them, this is what we want, this is what will sell, this is what my kids need, our kids need, they're going to start producing more books like that. But it starts with us.
Yes.
And that goes for any literature, any genre, any topic, anything that is important to you. If you want there to be more books out there published like it, start by supporting it. Even if you cannot purchase them yourself, there are tons of free or inexpensive things that you can do to encourage that.
That's a good word. I appreciate that. Can we dig a little bit deeper into the titles that you have available? I won't ask you, well, I started to ask you a favorite, but as a mother of 2 children, I have 4 children. Don't ask me who my favorite child is. Depends on the time of day and what you've done lately. But maybe you could share with us your first book or your latest book, or just tell us some things.
So I have a lot of books now. But I think the one that the one I'll talk about is actually my fourth book. And while it was my fourth book published, it was actually my first book written.
Okay.
But the reason I didn't publish it first was because I was so panicked and paranoid about what other people would think. I thought I went from like, this is an amazing idea. Everybody's going to love it. But what if they hate it?
Yes.
This is such a good idea. And I think people are really going to, but what if they hate it?
Yes.
So because of that, it was so close to my heart. I was super picky about it. It had to be perfect. And I was just so self-conscious because it was so important to me. And now I feel a little bit silly because to this day, it's my best-selling book. It's Rhythm Rescue. And that one is a superhero girl. And, throughout the story, there are two rhythms that are the inverse of each other. And you have to clap the right rhythm to keep the story going. And at the end of the book, there's even a spread that says, oops, nothing happened, try again. So if you're a parent or you're a teacher that is using the book, if you want to just let a rhythm slide, you could let a rhythm slide. But if you really want them to pay attention to the rhythms, that's an easy way to say, her powers didn't work. Let's look at that rhythm again. And it still be a positive experience. And so it's a great option to have at the back of the book as a tool there. But I released that book in, what was it? I think it was August of 2020, I believe. And it became an Amazon bestseller within the same month.
Wow.
It's my best-selling book to this day. Really, it's what put me on the map. And yeah, like I said, I feel silly being shy about it now, but when there was nothing else out there like it on the market, it's so easy to, feel self-conscious or feel like, what if this is a complete flop? What if people don't even want this? What if it's met with nothing but criticism? And my whole goal in the first place was to help children be excited about music and reading. And so I was like, well, what if it doesn't accomplish that goal? And I think, knowing what I know now, I just wish I had taken the leap sooner in publishing in general.
Oh, yes. Well, and everything that you're saying, of course, I'm excited about sharing the books, and I love that you're being kind of transparent and vulnerable with us to share your feelings of, I hate to say inferiority, but that's the word that's coming to mind in your own head. I can relate that to how piano kids can feel. Music is extremely personal. And then to share that at a recital or something like that, what if they don't like it? I invested all this time. I care about this music so much. So you're relating on an adult level the same kinds of feelings that piano kids feel in all of the different situations they have to experience through their lessons.
Well, and I think the other thing too that I've learned on this whole journey, and I think it ties into music so well, is that when you're creating, when you are tapping into that creative gene, when you're making music, you're singing, you're playing, you're writing a book, it's not supposed to be for everyone. Like if you think about the best-selling books out there, or the top ranking movies, or anything that's viral, the top Netflix shows, if you think about any of that, there are so many people that are like, oh, you have to watch this show. Oh my gosh, this is the best movie ever. And how many people say, I didn't like that. Wasn't my taste, not for me, not my cup of tea. There are some people that are more extreme than that and very opinionated. But there are plenty of things out there, plenty of media things out there, or genres that I don't personally like, that I know a lot of people who do. And I think that's the biggest thing that it was hard to let go of. But once I did, it made the biggest difference, was just realizing that what I'm creating is not for everybody, and it's not supposed to be. It's okay. And the people that it is for, they're going to feel what I'm feeling. They are going to envision what I'm envisioning. They're going to experience what I'm experiencing, and it is going to resonate with them, and it is going to be beautiful. And if that is not their experience, that's okay. It was, It doesn't have to be.
Right.
Um, you don't have to be, people pleaser me over here. You don't have to be, you don't have to fit everybody else's mold. And I think that that's so important to remember when you're creating is it's more important what you are sharing and that you are proud of yourself because the people that really get what you're creating will feel the same way.
Yes. And I appreciate the way you framed that um, whatever movie or book or even fashion may not be my cup of tea. That's not to say there's anything wrong with that. So for a performer or someone sharing their talent or their creativity, don't internalize it. If someone it's not their match, that's okay. But that not is not a reflection on you or a lack in your creativity. It's for you to begin with. I remember years ago, I made some sort of piano arrangement and I shared it with someone who had come. I got to speak with a performer who came and did a concert. And so I just knew that this was going to be my big break or whatever. And he was so kind to listen to whatever my arrangement was. But then he said, make sure that it's for you. Don't try to start with how many millions of dollars you're going to get. Just start with your own creativity, your own enjoyment, and then whoever else is attracted by it, then enjoy that. But don't feel like you're a failure from the beginning because you didn't, go viral or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the hardest things when you're a creative because it is personal, so it's hard not to take everything personally.
Right.
It's hard. It really is. But I think that that's an important skill too, socially, academically, in childhood, in adulthood, it's hard, but it's so worthwhile.
Would you tell me um what age range and your books, if I'm understanding correctly, they're more picture books. So what age range would you say they're for?
Most of them are for ages like 3 to 8, sometimes 3 to 9, but I do have a couple that are a lower level, like Tiger Tempo, for example. That one teaches different tempo terms and it's interactive. It's really cute. There is a tiger and he's running a race. And so while he's running the race, you have to help him by keeping his pace. So the actual phrase inside the spreads is help the tiger win the race, tap the beat to keep his pace. And then it has the tempo term and a little speedometer to show visually how quickly this beat needs to be. And then in the illustration, the tiger is doing something that would warrant that speed. So if it's an open field, he might be, full on sprinting. But there's one point he's walking carefully across a log. You're not going to sprint across a log.
Yes.
There's one point where he's moving through the water. You move very slowly in the water. And so that one is actually geared more towards like pre-K through 2, the younger end of the spectrum. But I've had just as many like 5th and 6th and 7th graders really have a blast with some of my books. So, use that as a gauge, but, don't discount any age group. My 2-year-old loves some of my books too. So
That's the beautiful thing about it, I would imagine, is that the pictures are engaging. And so a child that may not be able to understand some of the tempo terms, they can still enjoy the pictures. And then as they have a greater understanding, then they have a different level of appreciation for what the story's telling. I think that's so smart.
Well, I think that's the other thing with a lot of my books too, is I try to put a lot of layers in there. So for example, The Song Garden is about a girl who, it's obviously a fictional story. There's a showcase and everybody creates their own song garden, their little gardens that sing.
Aww.
Well, the flower colors coordinate with boomwhacker colors.
Oh.
And the gardens have 5 rows like a 5-line staff. So you could play the songs inside the book. And there's a blank song garden at the back, so you could compose and write your own. And so that's something that, you could scale that down for a younger age, but you could just as easily get more complex with some of the with some older students too. It's the same thing for I have another one called When Step Met Skip. And that book was really fun because my illustrator is also a musician.
Oh.
So I came to her with the manuscript and she actually knew what the heck I was talking about.
That's always good.
Like with some of my other books, I've had to actually give mini lessons to my illustrators so that they knew what on earth I meant.
Yeah.
And so I told her, I'm like, all right, it's called When Step Met Skip. Here's the manuscript. I literally want Step and Skip to be like people, like personified. And she's like, okay, but you want them to kind of look like notes? I'm like, yes, but not be notes. She's like, okay. And I'm like, and here's the trickiest part. It takes place on the 5-line staff. So the story arc with all the places they're going, it has to, like, they can't jump around randomly. It has to be, if somebody were to play this out loud, it would make sense and it would sound good. And it also has to make sense with where they're going and jumping around in the story. And she's like, all right, let's go.
Wow. That's a great collaboration.
And it was a puzzle to piece together. It was not easy by any means, but it was a ton of fun. But those are the things that, like, you could just read that book with somebody and they would walk away knowing what steps and skips are, and they would have a little social emotional learning lesson, and that's it. But you could just as easily go deeper into the layers, and you could read it multiple times and go deeper each time. And so that's really my goal, is I don't want it to be a one-note story. I want there to be these opportunities. One other one I'll mention, it's called Ginger Snap Snatcher. If you've ever read the book, Who Took the Cookie from the Cookie Jar?
Yes.
Imagine Who Took the Cookie from the Cookie Jar, but it rhymes. It's Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Latinx family, so it's an abuela that we have in there. And there is vocal exploration hidden on every page. In the flour, as the cookies are being baked, in the Christmas lights, it's hidden in the background of every illustration. And then there's a song at the back of the book too. So something like that could just be a very classic, let's read this just for fun. Or you could sing it, or you could act out the book. There's actually a recipe for ginger snaps at the back of the book too. So I've had just as many people go and act out the book with the song or without the song, or, there's so much fun that you can have with reading. And that's really what my goal was.
That's so good. And I want to kind of vamp on that just a little bit more. Hopefully parents just almost instinctively sit down and take time to read with their children. And I know that parents are busy and there's so many things to do, and all of the chores and get ready for bed or whatever. But could you talk a little bit more about some of the value that you see? You mentioned, tracking from left to right, and that in itself is a skill that children don't innately know. They have to be taught. And then just the coziness of being, your child in your lap, and that closeness together. What are some other parent-child benefits that you see from reading?
A lot of confidence, but there's also a lot of like spatial awareness things, like the relationship between letters, how far apart they are, how close they are together, how high and low they are in comparison to one another, grouping things into words versus into sentences versus into individual letters. And that can sometimes get complicated with a word like
Yes.
Or I, because that's a word and it's a letter. Music has very similar relationships too. We have the bar lines for a reason. There's a structure component there. The way we would read music is very similar to the way we would read a book. And so there's a lot of like fine details that go a long way, but it's also just confidence. I can't remember what the exact statistic is off the top of my head, but it's something about how if you read for 15 minutes a day, by the end of the school year or something, your child will have read, I think it was like several hundred books,
Yes.
something like that. But if you only did it once a week, then they only would have read, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember the exact numbers, but the difference is astronomical. And the stronger a reader you are, the easier everything is going to be. Even as you get older, math problems suddenly become not math. They become word problems and understanding context and concepts and situations and social skills. And that all starts with reading. So just overall, the stronger a reader you are, it's going to bleed over into every academic field, into every social field. It's also just really important for modeling.
Yes.
One of the things I write into my books a lot is social emotional things. So Laszlo learns recorder. We literally learn how to play the recorder along with this character, and we see what happens when he tries and he fails and he gets frustrated. But most importantly, we see how the other kids in the class react and how the teacher reacts. Because something that I feel is not talked about enough is in older literature, books on like bullying, for example. What they would used to do is the story would be something like, this kid gets bullied, and then someone says, "Hey, don't do that," and then they don't do that, and then the end. But
That's
the
not
part
right.
where they get told don't do that is like 75% of the way through the book. So the biggest chunk of the book models name calling, treating people poorly. And kids are sponges. They do what they see. They do what they experience. So if that's what a book is about, if that's what children are seeing, however unintentionally, that's what they're going to learn. And that's why I had to be so picky in my classroom about what I would read. If a book had a name, like name calling in there, even once, I wouldn't read it. Because every single time I did, even if the rest of the book was fantastic, my kids learned a new vocabulary word that day.
That's what they latched onto. Yes.
That's what they latch onto. So I don't pick titles like that for my children, for my students, because they know what they see. And so in my own books and in the books that I choose to work with, I'm now looking for experiences where we see a child who is frustrated, a child who feels like they're failing, a child who is dealing with very natural, normal feelings, but I'm looking for the reaction. Instead of just being told, here's the answer, I want to see the child or the children around them solving the problem or working to solve the problem or asking the questions to solve the problem. Because the more they see that, the more they're going to do that themselves. And right now in the publishing industry, that's what's being prioritized. Social emotional learning is so, so huge right now. And the publishing industry has seen what a difference that has made. And especially after the pandemic, those social themes and social learnings more important than ever before. And so that's what we're starting to see in literature. And that is completely priceless. That's invaluable skills that our kids need.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you for that. You shared some perspectives that I hadn't thought about, and I'm glad it kind of gave you the opportunity to go a little deeper into some of those things that are more personal to you and more important to share right now. Do you have anything that is yet to be released? Do you have any sneak peeks that you can share with us?
So my first musical book that was published was Laszlo Learns Recorder, and I now have the final files for Laszlo Learns Recorder 2. So
yay!
that one will be released in 2024. Right now it's looking like March 2024. Which is Music in Our Schools Month. So I'm really excited about that one. That's been a long time in the works. I booked that illustrator shortly after book one, and she was booked out all the way until now. She got that popular. So I have been looking forward to this. This is my first true sequel. As far as concepts go, my books all have a lot to do with each other, but this is my first actual sequel with the same characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited about that one.
I can tell. I'm loving the smile on your face. For anyone who's listening to the podcast, you are beaming right now. That is so cool. I will confess to you that I haven't. I don't own any of your books presently, but I'm extremely grateful to meet you and get to know you more personally. So the next thing after we get offline, off our interview, I'm hopping online to order some books, and I appreciate your recommendations. How can people find your books, and how can people follow you?
Yeah, all my books are available wherever books are sold. So you can go to your, local bookstore and request them. You can request them at your local library, but they're also available like freely online, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Target.com. They're also available on my website, VickyWeber.com. It's Vicky with a Y. And then, yeah, I am pretty present on Instagram, mostly Instagram and Facebook. But the easiest way to find me is on my website. So, yeah.
Awesome. And I will have that linked up in the show notes for everyone to make a beeline straight to your website and see what other titles you have to offer. I appreciate you sharing a little bit of an in-depth coverage of some of the specific titles. Before we sign off, is there anything else that you would like to share? Any final word?
No, I think just, as a parent, we have so much pressure on us to do all the things and, raise the best kids that we can and check off all the boxes. But I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is for your kids to know that they're loved and for you to be there and present with them, and if you can do that, that's all they need.
That's it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Vicky. This has been a great conversation. I appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And that's the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for hanging around all the way to the end. If you haven't done so already, this would be a great time for you to hit the subscribe button. If you're listening through Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcast player is, hit subscribe so you will be the first to receive next week's episode. I would love to connect with you. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Piano Parent Podcast, and you could just email me, Shelley at pianoparentpodcast.com.